But this war was growing beyond a joke. Smugglers and federal agents countered each other with sophisticated techniques. The stakes became higher and more deadly. The most intense battles of American Prohibition were not on the high seas, but in the calm waters of the Detroit River. On one side of the river was Detroit, the first major city in the U.S. to go dry. On the other side, the Canadian distilleries, producing thousands of gallons of whiskey a day. The temptation was just too much for many who crossed over on the daily ferries.
We went across the border to Canada in the days of the Prohibition, and even I did that. We all did that. We went over for a nice bottle of something or other to bring back for a friend or whoever.
With such a narrow strip of water, the risks were low and the opportunities high for anyone with a fast boat and entrepreneurial spirit. In the winter, you didn't even need a boat. To the annoyance of Henry Ford himself, his trusty Model T became the bootlegger's accomplice. Prohibition gave Detroit, the Motor City, its second industry, the illegal liquor business. The border was mapped with a dotted line, but as Police Commissioner Roy Haynes complained, it is impossible to prevent liquor from dripping through that dotted line. Bootleggers like Dennis Renault's father could make a tidy sum of money in one trip.
Yeah, if they bought a case of whiskey for $70 and sold it for $135, how much money do you think they'd make? They'd make more money than they'd make maybe in a week, because even Ford was only paying $5 a day, I think it was.
As long as the Canadian Customs form showed the destination to be Cuba, South America, or St. Pierre, you could take all the booze you could carry. And if the boat returned empty an hour later, it wasn't Canada's problem. But by the late 20s, underworld gangs were pushing the smaller operators out of the business. With their organized operations, 75% of all imported liquor coming into America flowed through Detroit. The best-known gang in Detroit was the Purple Gang. They were a group of Jewish hoods run by the Bernstein brothers, and they had large accounts and credit lines with Canadian exporters.
And you'd see them great big Cadillacs come in, and they'd have a chauffeur driving, and these guys would be in the back, you know, all smoking cigars. They didn't smoke a cigarette then. They were all smoking cigars, you know. And they'd come and they'd go into Lefty Clark was a gambling joint upstairs. They'd go over to one store to another. Guys that handled whiskey or stuff like that. And they'd say, listen, you want this store to run now tomorrow for the next week, you got to pay me $50 right now. So they'd pay them $50 and they'd make sure that the store would run. And so that's the way they went through. But if the guys say, no, I can't do it, okay. So before the night was over, somebody throw a bomb over there, and there goes the whole building up. So
Gunfire and crime became regular headline news in Detroit. Federal agents and the police put their efforts into breaking up the gangs, but the gangs had the protection of extremely powerful and prominent figures. On the Canadian side of the river lies Hiram Walker, the largest distillery in the world. Although an old and established company, it embraced the new illegal trade. The owner, Harry Hatch, wanted Americans to drink his whiskey, Canadian Club. The product was tailored to suit the smugglers. The long-necked bottles were replaced with short, stumpy ones to prevent breakage in transit, and decorative tins to disguise the contents. Hiram Walker became involved with some of the shadiest gangsters in America. The company address book lists Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik, Capone's own accountant. And the infamous Bill McCoy. He never did quit, as he claimed. He simply changed his identity and threw in his lot with the organized traffickers. He delivered thousands of cases of French champagne for Hiram Walker, but no one talked about the real McCoy anymore. To the company men, he was Black Dog. Canada had local prohibition, but there were no restrictions on the export of liquor. In the first 7 years of United States prohibition, distillers like Hiram Walker increased production by 400%. The Canadian government reckoned that they were owed some export tax. In 1926, the Canadian Customs set up a commission to investigate the distillers and export companies. Their findings have been kept quiet for 70 years. What they discovered implicated some of America's most prominent citizens. The Hiram Walker file was a prime document. The report revealed the company's illicit workings, how it used fictitious consignees in phony locations, how it smuggled liquor into the United States, how it used false documents and hid behind numerous dummy companies. The Canadian Customs didn't care whether smugglers were breaking American law. Its concern ended with the missing export tax. But in the process of investigating this, a number of American citizens who had export companies in Canada came to light. One name came up again and again: Joseph Kennedy's.
And then it became what?
Then it became the Joseph Kennedy Company.
Well, who's Mr. Kennedy?
He's a merchant. He used to be in the cocktail business.
And what does he do now?
I couldn't say.
You don't know what he does now?
No, sir.
And who are the officers of the Joseph Kennedy Company?
There are no others.
Well, can you suggest anybody else who can throw any light on these books?
No, sir.
They never proved that this was Joseph Kennedy who started America's first family. But his involvement with the liquor traffic is undeniable. By the end of Prohibition, Kennedy had secured the exclusive U.S. distribution license for Haig & Haig Gordon's Gin. Through the 1920s, the United States government turned a blind eye to the top people, its own people, who were breaking the Prohibition laws and consorting with the syndicates of organized crime. Wet or dry, Prohibition allowed the organization to crush the individual. America no longer wanted adventurers or heroes. Prohibition was meant to unify America. Like making cars on the new production lines, it was intended to mass-produce perfect, sober, law-abiding citizens. But in 1928, the newly elected President Hoover admitted that the law would fail without public support.
But a large responsibility rests upon our citizens. There would be but little traffic in illegal liquor if only criminals patronized it. We must awake to the fact that this patronage from large numbers of law-abiding citizens is supplying the reward and is stimulating crime.
But Prohibition removed the individual's responsibility. After all, the very act stated it wasn't the drinker who was breaking the law. Prohibition had promised to rid the country of poverty. The Roaring Twenties had brought in a golden and glamorous age. Prohibition and prosperity seemed natural partners. And as long as this prosperity lasted, Prohibition's place was guaranteed. Within a year, America would witness a massacre, a market crash, and one of the bloodiest crime waves in history.